This is the story of a dog that returned. But something was very, very wrong. You never really think about the small cracks in your world until something slips through them. For me, it began with a broken gate and ended with something sitting in the dark, wearing my dog's face. But by then, it was too late. It was just another ordinary evening. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and violet, like a painting. Daisy, my Labrador, was out in the backyard, chasing fireflies. She loved this time of day, her tail wagging, her bark echoing through the neighborhood. But when I called her inside, she didn't come. I stepped out, expecting to find her nose deep in some forgotten corner of the yard, but instead, I found the gate to the backyard swinging open. The latch was broken, hanging by a thread, and there were scratches deep, jagged grooves in the dirt, trailing into the woods beyond. My mind raced, trying to rationalize it. Maybe she'd chased a squirrel, or a fucking raccoon. But in the pit of my stomach, something felt wrong. Something felt off. 3 days. That's how long Daisy was gone. I plastered the neighborhood with posters, called every goddamn shelter, walked the woods, until my legs felt like they were going to snap. Nothing. And then, just as suddenly as she disappeared, she came back. It was the middle of the night, when I heard the scratching at the door. Groggy and half asleep, I stumbled to let her in. There she was sitting on the porch, her head cocked to the side, her eyes catching the dim glow of the porch light. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. Daisy had come home, but as she walked past me into the house, I noticed it, a faint, sour smell, clinging to her fur, like damp earth and rot. I brushed it off. She'd been in the woods, after all. But looking back, that smell was the first sign, the first hint that something was wrong, something was different. At first, it was little things that I tried to ignore, tried to explain away. Daisy wouldn't eat her favorite food anymore. She stopped sleeping in her usual spot by the fireplace. Instead, she'd sit in the corner of the room, staring at the wall, completely still, like a goddamn statue. Her tail didn't wag anymore. It just hung there, limp, like it was dead. One night, I woke up to the sound of her pacing, slow, deliberate steps, across the hardwood floor. I watched from the bed as she moved to the window, pressing her nose against the glass, staring out into the dark. Her breath fogged the pain, but I swear I saw something staring back from the shadows outside. Something that wasn't a fucking raccoon, or a stray cat. It wasn't just her behavior. She looked different, subtle things. Her fur seemed darker, in some spots. Her movements too smooth, almost rehearsed. And her eyes, God, her eyes. They didn't reflect the light anymore. They absorbed it, like fucking black holes. It was late. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator, a constant droning sound that filled the silence. I was lying in bed, trying to convince myself that everything was fine, that Daisy was just adjusting, just getting used to being back. Then I heard it, a sound like nails tapping on wood. I sat up, my heart hammering in my chest like a drum. The sound was coming from the hallway. I crept out of bed, careful not to make a sound, and peeked around the corner. Daisy was there, sitting in the middle of the hallway. Her head was tilted, twisted at an angle that shouldn't have been possible. She was tapping her paw against the floor in a slow, deliberate rhythm. The sound echoed through the house, each tap like a fucking nail driving into my skull. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I felt it pure, unfiltered malice. This wasn't Daisy. It never had been. The thing sitting in front of me was something else, something evil, and it was wearing her face like a fucking mask. The next day, I followed her. She led me to the basement, a place she'd never gone before. I don't know why I went down there. Curiosity, fear, some twisted need to know the truth. The air was colder than it should have been, heavy with the smell of decay, like rotting flesh. Daisy, or the thing pretending to be her, stood in the corner, facing the wall. And then she spoke. Not a bark, not a growl, but words. Words in a voice that didn't belong in this world. Low, guttural, in a language I didn't understand. It was like listening to something that had crawled out of the deepest, darkest pit of hell. She turned to face me, her body elongating, limbs stretching unnaturally, her jaw unhinging like a snake's. Her eyes glowed with a sickly yellow light, and I felt a wave of pure terror wash over me. I stumbled backwards, my heart pounding, my mind screaming at me to run. But I couldn't move. I was frozen, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The door was swinging shut, leaving me alone in the dark.